I think that was definitely not the intention of Adam Rothfeld, who was part of the new NATO strategic concept working team to somehow dismiss the NATO in the context of this new concept of new transatlantic community. It was more about psychological and political environment, where of course NATO is playing an important role. So I think this is not that NATO is under the question. I think Poland and also Adam Rothfeld himself has been a staunch supporter and promoter of NATO within the new security community. The second one is very short about the military reform. I'm not the specialist on the details, and I think Bob very eloquently dealt with that. At the same time, I think I would mention one word that, of course, it's also a discussion what will happen to military reform in Russia. It's not yet clear, actually, because when elections are coming, there is a huge disagreement from the officers' rankings that this quite dramatic reduction of the forces, and that's why Serdyukov was at the moment in implementing this reform might be one of the fire lines very soon in the future. So what are the future developments? I think there is this element of uncertainty about Russia's military reform, but generally it also reflects that Russia understands itself that there are many weaknesses within Russian military. Will it become automatically stronger after this military reform, which actually might not happen? This is another issue. About the impact on neighbors, then I would ask a little bit like the sort of question instead of answering. When was Russia's influence at most recently? I think 2008 August, or 2008 and second part of 2008. When exactly Russia sort of showed its presence, when the countries within the former Soviet Union were very hesitant and cautious about the activities with respect to Russia. Really there was uncertainty. So actually it has nothing to do with recent policy. Of course, one might say that at the moment there is certain kind of how to say, subsidizing, sidelining the issue of Eastern Partnership probably on transatlantic agenda, especially probably in US. At the same time, probably again over-optimistic, but I think this not only a reset policy, not only provides the possibility for Europeanization of EU-Russia policy, but also for Europeanization of EU-Eastern Partnership policy or for neighborhood policy. But actually at the moment, Eastern partners should become, it's another issue, will it become, but I mean should become more important sort of target group of European Union, because so far I think there was impression that it is sort of somehow field of US activities and not European activities. I think with the opening of window between US and Russia, I think there's also opening of window for EU dealing more actively in actually Eastern neighborhood. With Russia's presence, because again I think that Russia is playing certain kind of role in some of the issues like Transnistria. I mean, let's be realistic, cannot be solved without Russia's certain kind of presence and a dialogue and negotiations and probably concessions. About the Warsaw, that's a difficult one, in a sense, an easy one, as Imans was saying. At the same time, I'm wondering what is I actually will use Anne Applebaum, which of course is also Polish, partly they have knowing her connections to the Polish foreign decision establishment, and of course it reflects immediately or reminds me of Thomas Friedman, the first law of petropolitics, and when the prices are going up, then the countries become more authoritarian, when the countries go down, the countries become less authoritarian, and an example of Nigeria, Venezuela, Russia in 90s and 2000s, this example, and also more assertive in foreign policy terms. But I would like to link this sort of my answer about the Warsaw and exactly this Thomas Friedman principle on Applebaum principle on energy. I think energy is an important issue. I think the insecurity feeling is the most important to address, because I think one of the problems, fundamental problems of Central and East Europeans, that we feel constantly insecure, or we have felt constantly for many years insecure about many issues. And I think in this case there is nothing to what US should do with Russia or some other countries, but actually how to strengthen those links between US and Central and East Europeans. And I think in this regard, energy issues are very important. I would immediately say unconventional gas. global shale gas initiative. And I think here was the technology what United States have, and actually with expectations on the side of Poland, on the side of Hungary, on the side of the Czech Republic, on the side of Latvia and Lithuania, I think there is a potential somehow to politicize actually the sort of unconventional gas element and strengthen this issue.
Medium or long perspective.
Yes, that is definitely. I would agree with that. So of course there are no, in this case, short-term answers.
I've now had a chance to reflect, and I thought of the crucial question that we should be asking President Obama when he visits Warsaw. Can you assure us that the exercises planned for Poland in 2013 will take place?
What are European security issues today, apart from energy, and apart from Iran and Afghanistan? And the second thing is, I'm just curious about the impact of the Arab Spring on all of this that we're talking about U.S.-Russian relations in Europe. For example, the fact that the U.S. got Russia to abstain on the UN resolution, is that a product of reset? Is there other factors at play in that? And clearly this is going to change a lot of the dynamics, because Russia may be playing a wait-and-see role to see what happens across the coast of northern Africa. But Syria and Libya are having an impact both on NATO and on our relationships that we still really don't know what the end result's going to be.
The panel was talking about the window that has opened in the relations between the US and Russia. But by the definition, windows are supposed to be closed at one point. And my question would be, perhaps, what should be the things that, from a US point, should be made, should we get from Russia? What should be priorities on the table?
Thank you. Bob, you mentioned that there is a dialogue, and there is also the desire not to jeopardize the dialogue in general. It's perceived it's going to be more productive in the end. But I always wonder, two things actually, about the United States. When Michael McFaul goes to Russia to talk to Mr. Sukhov, is there really a conversation? Is it really a conversation that makes sense, at least when you get the bottom line on the US side?
What are the European? Well, first, just to clarify, what I was trying to convey was that the core issues in the relationship now are, I mean, they're broader than before, but the centerpiece is still pretty traditional in the sense of some hard security issues. Although there's a lot more going on in the reset. I mean, if you go to the website of the State Department, they issue periodic summaries of what's going on. You'll see there are like 13 or 16 working groups on a whole range of issues. So they're trying. There's for a long time there's been talk about trying to build a better economic and trade basis for the relationship, energy, and so on. We'll see. I mean, I don't rule out that there's going to be more than that. There has been actually some movement in some of those areas, but as I say, this is at the margin so far. But to get back to your question, what are the real European security issues? I think there are a couple that I would focus on. One clearly is energy, and although here, I mean, this is in many ways more an EU issue than a US or NATO one, but I do think there's a US role. In part because some of the problems I see in this region have a lot to do with coordination and process questions, and I think the U.S. can help in pushing that. I think a lot of it has to do with cooperation among the Baltic states in producing a true intra-Baltic market, coordinating these various projects, not all of which can happen, dealing with the old energy island. Baltics is an energy island problem from the Soviet days and so on. I think there's a U.S. role that can help push some of the politics of this, and which can, in some cases, can help with some technical issues, especially on the gas side, and B, some of the financial issues, and helping put together arrangements to get strategic investors in, which are going to be needed to get some of these projects, particularly the bigger ones in LNG, shale gas, and nuclear power, to make those happen. So that's one area. Cyber is another one. Haven't talked about that. Again, there's a bigger role for NATO. or at least in part. But again, the real issue here, I think, is going to be, as it is in the U.S., is to find a way to combine government and non-government, serious non-government work, because so much of the infrastructure that you worry about is privately owned. And this is a problem we found in the U.S. The government can't simply tell banks, financial institutions, et cetera, to improve their security. They have to, this is something that this is something they have to work out in conjunction with private interests. And when I look at this part of the world, the same thing is going to be true. That's an area where where over the longer run, I think there's a lot of work to be done. On the defense side, I should come back to Atis's question, because I didn't quite answer all of it. This has to do in part with that is the implications of this military reform. As I say, the good news about it, if it works in Russia, is that it means not the end of conscription, but the end of a mass mobilization army. The other side of it is that if it works, it's a more quickly mobilizable and deployable military. And that requires a new look at what is that? I don't have the answer to this yet, but it does imply to me that people need to take a new serious look at, okay, what does that imply for Article 5? It's not because I think that there's an imminent threat of invasion, it's not that. But I think, these are things you do need to take seriously, and it would be, look like a different military. That's a third area. So those are three. There are a lot of other issues having to do with Russian-Baltic economic relations, which have security dimensions to them, and which I note here, because this have to do with the worries about the impact of Russian businesses, for example, not just energy, but elsewhere, in economies in this part of the world. The only thing I'd say about that is that it's, as sort of an analytical or intelligence matter, it's important to look at what's happening in Russia, but as a policy matter, I view this much more as a domestic policy issue than a foreign policy issue. And what I mean by that is that, we're not going to change in the near term how these companies operate in Russia, how they behave in Russia. It's going to be a while, if ever, before Russia changes enough so that they change. And you don't want to kick them out. I mean, you can't do it, and there's an interest in having, it's not in anybody's interest to try to break economic ties with Russia in this region. There's one thing that people can and should do, which is be very, very tough about how any company, whether it's Russian or American or Swedish or Latvian, operates on your own territory. Baltic states have made enormous progress in reform, but there's still more to be done. There's an issue of incomplete reform. And I don't mean just in Latvia. We have it too with the US, but I'm looking at things like banking reform, campaign finance reform, and so on. I mean, I think there's a domestic agenda here, which has security implications, which I think are worth looking at. Okay, very quickly on Russia and the Arab Spring. This is one area where I think I disagree with you, Mons. I don't think it's the case that Russia is more is more sympathetic to Islamic radicalism. To the contrary, I think they're very worried about it, but they don't see this coming. They're not sure what the implications of the Arab Spring will be. There's nervousness about who these people are that may come to power and what their relationship is to more fundamentalist movement. But more importantly, I mean, it shows a little bit of the ambivalence. I think that it has been affected by the reset in the sense that they've decided that this is not an issue where they want to confront the U.S. and the West, especially if China is not going to do it. When you saw the vote in the Security Council, you could see this ambivalence. The result was not no, but it was also not yes. It was we abstain. So they didn't want to get in the way, but they also didn't want to sign up to it and be associated with it. And you see, on the one hand, in public, there's more and more criticism of it. Whether there's going to be anything beyond harsh rhetoric, I frankly doubt. But this is, in that sense, I think the reset has mattered. They decided this is not an area where we're really going to pick a fight. I'm not sure if this had come up 2 years ago whether they would have vetoed it or not. It also may depend on what China would have done.